while we're talking. So I'll drink it right now.
Right, there we go. So, how was your weekend?
It was good. I spent a lot of it here. So
Yes, because you were
Right.
preaching. Yep.
Yeah.
That takes up a lot of time.
it was a nice weekend, though.
That's good. Yeah, nice weather overall in general. And
Yes.
Although it was indoors on the 10:30, huh?
Yeah, that was a surprise because the weather forecast didn't seem to indicate that it would be rain. But by the afternoon, we were able to go on a hike with our dog. So
Nice.
It was nice.
Nice. How many? You have just one dog?
no, we've got two. We've got
Okay.
a really old lady she's a teddy bear, which is a mix between a Bichon and a Shih Tzu.
Okay.
And she is just about to turn 15.
Okay.
And then we have a rescue Chihuahua who is 6.
Okay.
So he has a lot more energy than our old
Okay.
teddy bear. And so he loves the hikes. She thinks she wants to go on the hikes. It's kind of heartbreaking, but she can't make it. So
Yeah. Yep. We have 5 kids and 3 cats. So and no dogs. But
Yeah.
you know, that's a different story. But
it's a busy house.
it is always a busy house.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, we just hung out. We ended up going to the pool on Sunday afternoon. We have a pool pass to the Richfield
Cool.
pool, which is outdoors. So got to soak that up while we've got that
For sure. Yeah.
before things go south or go cooler.
Yes.
Do you have a season that you prefer?
I guess I don't. I am a person that loves change. And so
Okay.
I like the changing of the seasons. And I am happier being warm than cold, though. So if I had to pick, I would rather not be freezing.
Yes.
So a couple years ago, I was in Phoenix in July, and the temperatures were hitting 100 and teens. And we went to the Grand Canyon. I guess down at Phantom Ranch in the heart of the Grand Canyon, the thermometer stops at 120. So
Okay.
that's what they say the height. When it hits that, that's all you know. I loved that. I felt like I was getting a nice warm hug whenever I
okay.
was
Yep.
outside. A lot of people don't like that, but
Right.
I really liked it. So I would rather that if I had to pick that or like the North Pole, I'd probably pick that.
Well, I think between the two, yeah, that's probably an easier choice.
Right.
As I've gotten older, it's like I used to not like heat as much. Sometimes, because the air conditioning goes on here quite a bit.
Yes.
Sometimes I like to, when it's been a hot day, leaving, and just sitting in the car, even though it's been baking in the sun and it's really hot in there, and it's just there's something that's just for at least a little while.
Yeah.
And then I start sweating, and there that goes. And I don't have air conditioning in my car, so that also doesn't help. So, but there are points in time where it's like, ooh, I've been in air conditioning for quite a while.
Yes.
For hours on end, and then it's just go out there and sit.
Yes. I do have to say, there was one time I took a group of youth and young adults on a mission trip to Jamaica, and we went in June. That's the low season because it's so hot there.
Yes.
And it was a heat wave. And so we were doing a lot of physical labor, and we went back and stayed every night at a YWAM camp. So
Okay.
that's Youth with a Mission.
Yes. Yep.
And that's like dorm type rooms with
okay.
no air conditioning,
Oh,
and
yeah.
they face the sun all day long. And so when you don't have the opportunity to cool off at all, that can be really hard too. The only way I could sleep was I would get completely wet. Everything had to be wet, and then
Yes.
turn the fan on and lay there and have the fan blow while you're wet.
Oh, man.
That was the only way to cool down. Even the swimming pool they had at the YWAM camp, it felt like a warm bath. So you didn't cool off by swimming.
Right.
But if you could get out and fan yourself, then you could cool down.
That makes sense.
Yes.
We're lucky to live in our times where we've got air conditioning
Yes.
and that stuff, especially, in an instance like that.
Yes.
That can spell disaster for
Right.
certain people.
Health-wise, it's very
Health-wise, yeah.
dangerous. Yeah.
Yep.
The we did have a couple of people in our group that would get some heat exhaustion. And the person that was running our mission experience, he had a car in Jamaica. So he would just turn it on and he'd have it running with the air conditioning on for anybody that needed to sit.
Wow. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good that that's there. So you're listening or watching the Trusted Story podcast. I'm Ethan Miller. I'm here with Jill Bergman, the pastor here at Prince of Peace, and you were preaching this weekend. I believe the title was Seen.
That was the theme.
That was the theme. Okay.
The text that were chosen. Yes.
Okay. And so, what brought me? Right away, talking about patriarchy, right? Right at the get-go,
Right.
and how there were important changes that, how God views society as a whole, right?
Yeah.
So can you kind of jump into that story, right?
Yeah. So the story was about 5 sisters who were not allowed by Israelite law to inherit their father's property, which became a dangerous situation for them because that was the only way that they could take care of themselves. And that's all they had ever known. But because it was a patriarchal system, then only males could inherit this property. And it seems like from the reading, they didn't have a brother who would look out for them or maybe even any uncles. I don't know where all the men were in the family that could have inherited this, but it seems like they were facing the real possibility that all of that property would be given to somebody else and they would kind of be left without any way to take care of themselves. And they felt that they were ready to take on that responsibility and that it was actually the right, the just, the kind thing for that to happen. And I think it's so interesting how this patriarchy had evolved through the Israelites all the way through the Bible. God is calling women to be in partnership in leadership. I mean, in the garden, there was the man and the woman in the garden, and together they formed the image of God. And we've got Abraham and Sarah. You don't get Isaac without Sarah. And it was really important that the two were united in this leadership. And we can just go on and on. There are tons of examples in the Bible of women taking leadership roles and being really important. A lot of the judges were women. All the way through the New Testament, there were leaders of the church and prophets and all types of people were women. But for some reason, cultures tend to stick with one gender or the other, and for the Israelites it was men. I think maybe there's a way to organize society that way, but it was a puzzle for these 5 daughters to figure out their place in the society.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, it's and even in the genealogy, brings up, the Bible brings up women in the genealogy, which was very not normal, right? For genealogies. Right.
And even in this story we read this past weekend, the names of the daughters are listed, which I thought was really cool. They were all given a name, and their genealogy was listed, where they came from, which clan they came from, all the way back to Manasseh, who, of course, was one of Joseph's sons, born in Egypt. And yeah, we know them by name. I think that's very interesting that when we read the New Testament stories, those women did not have names. Neither did the synagogue leader.
Right.
But none of them were called out by name. But those 5 sisters had a name. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's great. So why don't we jump forward into the woman with the bleeding issues, right?
Yeah.
For 12 long years.
Right. I can't imagine how her body had that much fluid. What a hardship that must have been. And I think of anybody, like if you have a bleeding ulcer, for example, people get really weak. They get very tired. Her life must have been very difficult.
Yeah. That's she has these bleeding issues, and then from what I heard from from the sermon. Also, she was considered to be unclean.
Yes.
Can you dive into that a little bit?
Right, yeah. So there are lots of ways to be unclean, and bleeding is one of them. Also, I mean, any type of bodily fluid makes you unclean. Touching pigs, touching a dead body. I mean, there's a lot of stories, like the Good Samaritan, that is also dealing with this topic about people who don't want to be made unclean. It's a big deal to have to be made clean again. And during that time when you're unclean, you're not supposed to associate with anybody else. You're not supposed to touch anybody because it's contagious to be unclean. And I mean, it starts with good roots, though. I mean, the Israelites were given certain rules about cleanliness for their own health. And if we trace back into the Old Testament, some of these rules that seem a little ridiculous now, like, don't eat pork, that the roots of this are, it made people really sick. So cultures that didn't understand hygiene, for example, or didn't understand how to cook pork really well, they had a lot more serious issues in their culture. And it was going to be a long time in the future before anybody understood germs, for example, scientifically. But this rule about keeping somebody who is sick away from the general population has some good roots in it. So they're not infecting the whole population. The problem is, though, that this woman it didn't know if, she could make somebody else bleed because she was bleeding. No. But the effect on her for 12 years must have been devastating. So there was not a way really to move in between it to say, well, it doesn't seem like she's contagious anymore. Maybe we can bring her back into society. It was just pretty much a solitary confinement sentence with no real hope that it would ever be alleviated. And she didn't do anything to deserve it. It seems like she had probably consulted lots of people for help, and nobody could figure it out. So it ended up being very harsh for her. Yeah,
that is, it's, I mean, I can only imagine that the 12 years of basically solitary sort of confinement, what that would do to you.
Right.
But the rules and the laws really is also my understanding that it really dwells on like hygiene. And taking care of yourself. Could you imagine if we had those rules with COVID, maybe the pandemic would have never happened?
Well, I don't know. I mean, then you think about, who's taking care of the sick person too, right? And that's like the story of the Good Samaritan. The people the priests that walked by him, the Levite and the priest, they were more concerned with maintaining their cleanliness laws than with being a good person. And at some point, hats off to all our medical professionals, you put yourself in line of danger in order to help somebody else. And I think that weighing that is really important. And so this woman, who was helping her? How was she being cared for spiritually, emotionally, physically throughout this whole time? And is following the letter of the law the most important thing? And I think that's what we're hearing from Jesus, that he comes to fulfill the law. So the law is made perfect. He does everything exactly right. But he goes beyond that to say, I'm fulfilling the law and I'm honoring God by reaching across some of these cultural barriers, like these unclean rules. So he was willing to have this woman touch him who was unclean, and then also reach out to that little girl who had died and touch her. He was willing to risk it in order to be helpful in those situations. And if we're talking about COVID, then there were a lot of people that did make that choice. They were going to risk it. They didn't understand how this thing was being spread necessarily. No. And sometimes their jobs were just that important, and they had to risk it. And some people did get sick, and a lot of people, though, received care that might have been alone otherwise. So, yeah, that's important as Christians for us to understand what is our highest goal. And hygiene is really valuable. but maybe our highest goal is loving people. And if we're following Jesus' example, loving people with our whole selves, even if there is a risk posed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you end up, sacrificing, right?
Right.
But what's more important? Is it the person that you're trying to help, trying to support, or is it yourself? And I think a lot of times, even in looking at the religious leaders of the time, what are they doing? They're looking out for themselves, right?
Exactly.
They're trying to be like, well, but the rule is more important because of X, Y, and Z, and they're not actually paying attention to the compassion, right?
Right. And it's not an accident that most hospitals are named something like St. Joe's, St. Luke's. I mean, most hospitals were started by Christians who understood that there is risk, but there is a higher calling to serve people, especially the people that other people are afraid to serve.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, you touched on the dead girl, right? And I found it interesting with the father who was a
synagogue leader.
A synagogue leader. Yeah. And tell me about why that was such a big deal for the synagogue leader to approach Jesus.
Right. Well, because he had his own system. You know, he had a system that he could go through for help, which didn't involve Jesus at all. You know, he was part of the Jewish leadership, their religious leadership, where maybe he could go to other synagogue leaders, or maybe he could go to the priests, go to the temple, go make offerings, go pray and offer it to God. And if none of those things worked, then just accept what had happened. But he kind of broke rank, and he just went right to Jesus, which I think was a huge risk for him, because he didn't even consider the blowback. What's going to happen? As we read the story of Jesus, we read about a lot of hostility towards him making changes, and so much of the hostility is coming from his own people, the Jewish people, because he's threatening what they consider to be normal or what they're comfortable with. Of course, a lot of what they were comfortable with was because they had made some type of understanding with the Roman officials too. So there was a little bit of, we don't want to raise an alarm with these guards that are watching us because they might take away other privileges of ours. So there was a lot to protect, to keep the peace in the area, which was tenuous at best. But he did not care. So he was willing to risk his reputation and cause a disturbance and lose maybe any respect he had had or place he had had in that system in order to take care of his child. And that is just completely putting himself on the line for this little girl.
Yeah. Let's talk about the faith aspect of, I guess, all of these stories, but why do you think that that's important?
I'm really glad you bring that up, because I think it's super easy to get the wrong message about faith from these stories, especially where Jesus says, "Daughter, your faith has made you well," to the woman who was bleeding. And it would be so easy to add up all these clues and say, well, that means that if my faith is strong enough, I'll get whatever I want. If my faith is strong enough, I will get healing too. And that puts the focus, once again, back on ourselves instead of on Jesus. But a lot of people live with that, and a lot of people's faith is really shaken if they're praying about something that they believe is just and good, and it doesn't happen. Somebody dies, or somebody stays sick, and they continue to live with this chronic illness. And then we're wondering, am I not faithful enough? Or is God not good enough? Or does God even care or exist? And sadly, a lot of people have gone down this path because they have read this in that way, saying it was up to the woman to have enough faith in order to get the healing. And I think it's a little dangerous too, because in these 3 stories, everybody got what they wanted, you know, and there is this real possibility that we pray and we don't get what we want. It doesn't mean that we're not better for praying or that we haven't been made well in some situations, but if we don't get what we want, then I think there's other spiritual things that we need to wrestle with. And so these stories, people got the happy ending, which is why I kind of pushed it a little bit too, to think, what if the ending wasn't as rosy as we can imagine it to be? Maybe there were consequences to what happened, and life got really hard. But yes, all of these people, they had the faith initially to at least bring their request to God. So the sisters brought it to Moses, who was their intermediary right there, and then the other 2 people brought their request directly to Jesus. And I think that's important learning for us, that who knows what other solutions they tried, especially the woman who had been sick for so long, but maybe those 5 sisters had already talked about it with other people too and been shut down. I don't know. I think there are probably a lot of roadblocks that we didn't hear about here, that these people encountered.
Right.
But their faith kept them pushing forward and allowed them to keep imagining that there was a better solution, that there was something else out there that God could bring them to, a better type of peace or answer.
Yeah.
So they just kept pushing and pushing. And I think we do hear about that too, that persistence is also valuable to God.
Yes.
Yeah. Don't give up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, the idea of faith and then the role that faith plays a lot of times is, depending on your theology, can really, really change that aspect, because some people think that it's dependent on what you do as a person, on whether you essentially are able to save yourself, right? And whether that's through works or whatnot. But in the Lutheran perspective, that's not ours to choose, right?
Right. Faith is a gift, and it also doesn't mean that you have 100% knowledge, because then it wouldn't be faith. So faith is a gift, and it is something that supports us in our life, but it's not something we can necessarily judge or measure. I think kind of the purpose of faith is to always keep drawing us closer and closer to Jesus. So I have faith that Jesus has my best interests at heart, and Jesus wants to hear from me, and Jesus wants to know all the things that concern me. And so my faith keeps me bringing all of those things to him to be in conversation. I also have faith that while I'm doing that, maybe some things about me are going to change, and stuff I don't even know to pray about. That maybe my hard heart will be softened, or a new idea will arise, and a new person will come to me with a suggestion. And my faith tells me to keep listening and keep looking, because Jesus might want to do something different than I imagine should happen, but it wouldn't be less an answer to my prayer.
Yeah. Imagination.
Yes.
Right? You kind of ended the sermon on your thoughts of the importance of imagination and what that could both entail. Can you dive more into that?
Sure. I think this is a really fun topic, because we don't tend to value our imaginations, but all throughout the Bible, God is talking to people in their imagination. Sometimes it's in their dreams. Sometimes God is giving them a burning bush, for example. I mean, that's beyond what we imagine is normal. This bush bursts into flames and God speaks through it. God is showing miraculous things that we don't expect. And I think that God has created us as creative people.
Mm-hmm.
Being made in the image of God is more than just physical appearance. I don't even know if it is physical appearance, but it's maybe God's heart is in us, and God's creativity is in us, and God's sense of generosity. All of these things are part of the image of God too. And if we have closed minds about what we believe to be possible, we are robbing ourselves of the opportunity to catch God's vision, I believe. I think that those 5 sisters, they could have just said, this is the law, this is as far as I can go with it, I better just accept it. But they were willing to imagine something more. And that father, I mean, death is pretty closed, but that father imagined something else. And I wonder if there is a little bit of a metaphor going on here in that story with the girl who died as well, because Jesus did raise her to new life. And that is a real core promise that we cling to as Christians, that all of us will be raised to new life one day. So this father was daring to imagine that could happen, even when all signs pointed to the contrary. And I think it's really interesting that when Jesus showed up to that house, the people laughed at him. And I didn't focus a lot on that, but that is one of the verses, and they laughed at him. So Jesus took their laughter and their ridicule, and he made something new happen anyway. And that woman, how many times had people told her, no, that this can't be fixed? And she just believed there was something else out there. She could imagine it. And so, I mean, I think it's so easy to become defeated in this world. And we hear so many negative messages. After worship on Sunday, a couple of guys told me that they were going to start imagining world peace and imagine that it could be true and happen. And I think that's really important. They might have been joking, but
Right.
I think it's really important that we continue to imagine world peace, because it would be really easy to give up and to say humans will never get along, and we're always going to kill each other and hurt each other, and we're just going down the drain.
Right.
If we don't have hope and imagination that there is a better way, then there simply isn't a better way.
Right. And I think there's an approach even in the Lord's Prayer, right? It's
Yes.
like on earth as it is in heaven, right? And
Yes.
that's the number one, the belief that we can make through God's help and through His imagination, right?
Yes.
We can make this world a better place, and that is one of our callings, right? As human beings, as followers of Christ, to make this world a better place. So, yeah, I suppose if you don't have that hope, that's a hard place to live in.
Right. And I mean, if we are focusing on something like world peace and we're bringing that to God, I strongly believe that God will lead us to a place that we do have an impact on. And it might be that there's tension in our neighborhood, and we are the ones now that get to start a conversation. Or there's somebody that's suffering. They don't have enough of their food or whatever. And now we're digging deep within ourselves to share our resources. We're being changed in the process. We're being challenged in the process. But for whatever person that we are impacting, their world is made better. Their world is brought more peace. And so, yay, that's good. That's a sign. That's a sign of progress.
Yes. Absolutely. What do you think that people should? Maybe a question they should ask themselves, or a lesson that they maybe should. I mean, obviously, people take away different things, but like from your perspective, maybe what is it that you have taken away from this sermon yourself?
I think that giving God the opportunity to speak into our imaginations is a worthwhile endeavor. And so when we talk about, praying and reading the Bible, I think this fits right in there. And how much fun it would be to have that time of prayer and just open it up and say, Jesus, what images do you want me to focus on right now? And just see what pops up. And then take that as a sign that we are meant to investigate that and push it a little bit farther and see where God wants us to go with that. So I think I like opening up people's ideas to what it means to meditate and to pray, and to be creative is also a spiritual calling. And so I think I just take away that permission to have some fun in my conversations with God and to play imagination games with God and see where that leads.
Okay. That sounds great. It's maybe easier said than done, because I think there's a lot of things that we have grown up with, like the kind of the even the part of the rituals, right? That make it difficult for us to maybe open up to a new way of praying or a new way of just, I don't know, given like...
Well, one thing, sometimes the rituals can really support this because, if you have something memorized, you just know the pattern, you're going to go over and over and over again, like the Lord's Prayer, for example. There is no harm in just saying it over and over and over again. And once you start to do that, our minds are going to go someplace. And that is the opportunity then for God to talk to us. Daydreaming isn't necessarily bad, so we're doing something by memorization. I notice this in a lot of contemporary music that we sing in worship. There will be a phrase that's just repeated over and over and over again, and it's like chanting, and there's a beauty to the chanting that allows the parts of our brain that aren't doing the beat and the letter to open up in a new way. I find that happens a lot when I'm like running. If I give myself room, I turn off the earbuds and I just give myself room to talk to God while my body is moving, it's working really hard. A part of my brain is focused on that, but then there's this other part that starts going all over the place.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's kind of similar. It's like even something like mowing the lawn or doing things like that where you are engaging your body, but they are repetitious in a way. Riding a bike is another concept of doing that. It just feels like the scattered thoughts or like all over the place sort of thing. It's like if you can concentrate on kind of the physical aspect of whatever it is that you're doing, a lot of times that allows your mind to wander wander and wonder, right?
Yes, exactly.
In a nice way that it's sort of like ideas and different things a lot of times come, even showers.
And some of those extraneous thoughts that would interrupt that, you don't have the energy to do that, to worry about those, because you're focused on something else.
Yes.
I've found that one thing I've said before is that you can't run and cry at the same time. So sometimes when I've been like really emotionally upset, and I would and it's a valid option to sit down and just cry for a long time. But maybe I've done that and I'm ready to be done. So I'll go out and run, and I can't do both at the same time. And so then while I'm running and I'm getting my breathing under control, I might get to the heart of what's really bothering me, or the message that I really do need to figure out. And so the truth happens then, because all the other little pieces that could send me off on another tangent, I just don't have the energy for them anymore while I'm doing something else. So I think it's a good way to get to some truth that way too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Jill, I really appreciate the time that we've taken here to sit down and talk about this further. Is there anything that we maybe missed?
I just want to mention that when we pray, sometimes God's answer is unexpected and not as straightforward as these 3 stories we heard today, but that doesn't mean God isn't answering and that God isn't at work in our lives. So I think it's important to just keep our eyes open and look for where God is interacting with us and the direction God is leading us.